You get it.
Welcome to the special Guthrie Public Works Authority workshop. Leroy, you want to take over?
I will. Kim, would you dim the lights?
Oops, there we go.
What I'm going to try to do tonight is, this is kind of pre-planning or prelude to our annual city council retreat. And of course, to maybe give some updates in history to our new council member as well. So tonight, what I want to do, if I turn this on. Tonight, I want to talk about the water distribution main valve replacement. We talked about it a little bit, but I'm going to go in more detail tonight. If we have time, I'm going to talk about the Congress has now reinstituted a program they call community project funding, what we used to commonly refer as the earmark, and the projects that we proposed for earmarking. At our next meeting, a question on Tuesday, May 11th from 9 to 12, we have city council orientation. Several council members, well, everybody except for Tracy, our new member, has been to orientation at least once. I don't want to print out 8 books if we're not going to have 8 people there. What's your all's thoughts as far as attendance at the orientation on Tuesday, May 11th? It's going to be the same thing you've heard before. Let us know.
I can't make it. Sounds like it's you.
I mean, we can do just meet with Tracy because he's the only one that's not heard it. We just need to know whether we need to call an agenda and do a meeting or not.
So far, I have Councilman Channel and the mayor also wanting
Okay.
to attend.
So what we will do is we will post an agenda. Once we find out if we're not going to have a quorum, then we won't do it as a public meeting. We'll just do it with a committee of the council. Okay? But let us know so we don't have to print out a bunch of books. It's just go get tracked.
Well, I'm not gonna be there if he's not. Are you?
No.
He's not.
I think all of you ought to be.
If James isn't, then you don't have a quorum.
Yeah. Okay. We can double check to make sure. On the next regular meeting night, May 18th, plan to have a 6 p.m. special workshop to talk about the Economic Development Administration grant applications. EDA has $3 billion under the new CARES Act. I can't even remember the name of the new act, but to distribute, and we want to propose some grant applications under that. We'll go through those. On Tuesday, June 1st, have another workshop before that meeting to talk about trash rates, convenience center rates, and versus what we are charged by Waste Connection, solid waste for collection and disposal rates. And then talk about youth sports facilities, look at a potential hotel tax rate increase and what that would mean and other funding opportunities. And then on the 15th, we will have another workshop at 6. There's a new state statute that allows us to do a public safety protection district where we can levy up to 5 mills within the city limits, and it doesn't include industrial property or farm zone property, but we can levy if we have to have a 60% yes vote of the citizens to levy it. If the council decides to pursue it, but that would be money through property taxes for equipment for police, fire, and EMS. And we'll talk about that on the 15th. On the 16th, or on July 6th, don't have a topic yet for that. On the 20th, I don't have a topic. And then, of course, August 3rd, we will have at 6 PM our budget workshop on the FY 2022 budget. And all that leads up to Friday, August 13th from 9 to 4 when we do our annual retreat. Okay. Water main and valve replacement. We've been through this to some degree. Pre-1975, we got 293,000 linear feet, or roughly almost 56 miles of water line that predate 1975. And that doesn't include the water main to Langston University and the city of Cole. So that's roughly 55 miles of water line that's 50 years old. A lot of it, the line that we worked on Division, the last big water break, that line was put in 1920s. So we have some that are 100 years old. Since 1995, we replaced roughly 2.5 miles of water line, or 4.5%. Well, if we, every 25 years, only replace 4.5%, we'll never go replace all our old lines. So we're going to have to do something and get on a more aggressive program. Now, we have started with our utility system. We did fund our wastewater treatment plant, which is a $20.6 million investment. So we have got started, but that's pretty much used our existing revenue source. Talk about the exposure or the experience we had back on February 18th. That 12-inch water main installed in 1920s. We were losing just under 2,000 gallons a minute. So we lost about between 11,000 and 14,000 gallons of treated water during that leak. But even a bigger problem is because that line's so old, the shutoff valves don't work. If you can't shut off at the end of each block or a designated area, then you have to go to a wider area and shut off more of town. And in this particular case, we had to shut the water plant down to bleed it down. And the other option, of course, is to do it live, which we don't have the equipment to do because we don't have those size pumps. The last time we had a water leak, we did go rent a larger pump and ended up doing it live with the water running, which is a little more challenging. To go back just for a minute, also a problem with the aging lines that I didn't touch on is the buildup of sediment of minerals. As you can see, the amount of buildup we have in these lines, this is one of the 1920 lines down by the water plant. When we have water leaks that disturb these lines, it stirs up these minerals, and that's when we get odor, color, taste issues, and then we end up flushing the lines. Well, there's no way to get rid of that unless you replace that line.
The last comment you made there,
Yes.
that last page,
Yes.
about the wastewater, you're just using that to say that that's why we don't have the money to work on the water lines, right? One's water lines and the other wastewater.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll go through that a little more. So if you look at the 55 miles of water lines, it's pretty much the entire town. If you look at the blue, covers the whole town. So we can't do them all at once anyway. We'd have the whole town tore up. Now we will do a thing called pipe bursting where we won't actually trench. A lot of them, there's places that we can just burst the pipe and dig down and go through the pipe rather than trench everywhere.
Repipe type deal?
Yeah, you just burst them and shove them through. To replace those 55 miles, we had the engineer do a cost estimate for us. It's about a $31.5 million project. So it's a major undertaking. And that does not include any major repairs or replacement of water towers. That's just the 55 miles of water lines that predate 1975 and all the valves. We had applied earlier this year for a CDBG grant to replace the 12-inch water main along Division from the water plant to Harrison Avenue. On that one, the CDBG grant is just under $300,000, and that's probably the maximum grant we can get in 1 year. Local match would be $585,000 for a total project of just over $885,000. Our match will come under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which is the follow-up to the CARES Act. We are estimated, there's been $1.8 million set aside for the city of Guthrie. We will get that direct. We should get half of it this year, half of it next year, if it works like it's supposed to. That money is eligible for water and sewer infrastructure. So after we do this $600,000 for this project, we'd have about 1.2 left to match other grants. But still, that's not going to get $30 million worth of work done, but it will at least get us started. Just to show you, we went over this in our retreat last year. People think, well, we passed the CIP sales tax, so we should have enough money to do everything. CIP sales tax, depending on what you use as far as projections, if we use the 4-year average of the full 4 years we have, by 2031, that sales tax, which runs to 2031, we would generate about $19.5 million. If we use a 2% growth rate, we would generate $22 million. If we estimate a 3% growth rate, it would be $23 million. Of course, you don't have $23 million or $19 million today. That's money coming in over the next roughly 10 years. So if you wanted to spend it today, you'd have to go borrow it, which would cost you interest. But if you look at the projects that we have already either completed or committed to, you've got $18 million of projects already committed to. And the wastewater treatment plant, $4 million is coming out of the CIP to go towards the wastewater treatment plant. Some of it we've spent on engineering already, and some of it will go towards debt service as we pay off our bonds. We set aside $4.4 million for industrial park. If we are successful in getting a grant from EDA with their $3 billion that they have to give out, that's an 80% grant. So that would be a little over $3 million that we would get in grant. So it would reduce that from our money from 4.3 to a little over $1 million. So that would give us money to either match other grants, to do other infrastructure work, or reassign to other things. But first, we got to get the grant. And then we have money over each year. We try to set aside money for an overlay program on streets. So there's not money in the CIP sales tax plan to replace water lines.
Right.
From our revenue source we have now, if you look at our wastewater treatment plant, it's a $20 million project. And we actually, to finance it, had 17.6 budgeted. We did a deal where we kind of did our own loan to ourselves to make up the $3 million difference, kind of bridge financing. Our plan is in January because we're limited, we can only borrow 8 million each budget calendar year. So in January, we will come back and take out this bridge financing and do another $3 million bond under OWRB, and our revenue source to pay that off will be CMOM funds. So we don't really have any revenue stream in our current rate structure to pay for $31 million of water line. If you look at our financing plan, over on the right, that's the balance of the $4 million coming out of the CIP. We're projecting taking revenue out of the operating fund each year. As these 4 bond issues are retired, this is the water plant. When that's retired, the money we're using to pay that bond issue will switch over and go to payments towards the wastewater treatment plant. The bond issue for the line to Langston, when it's paid off in 2025, if I remember the dates right, then our debt service that we're paying for that will then go towards the bond issue. So all of our current bond issues, that debt service, once it's paid off, is committed to go towards the bond issue for wastewater treatment plant. So we do not have any money in the CIP. We don't have any money in our current rate structure to replace $31 million of water lines. Another thing that, we didn't have a lot of choice to, but affected us, and I put this in for our new councilman because I don't know whether he'd be aware or not, but back in 2016, when the city did the settlement agreement with rural water, of course, we had to pay a lump sum settlement of $900,000 as part of that settlement. That doesn't include all the legal fees we paid. And then we had to install master meters to separate the customers we give them from our old customers. That was $700,000 plus or minus. We gave up 423 customers that we were serving up to that point of the settlement agreement. And if you take the difference between our retail rate and now what we get when we sell that same amount of water to rural water at a wholesale rate, our revenue dropped $154,000 a year. It just happened. And that was a settlement lawsuit. But it did have an impact on our revenue stream, is all I'm trying to get across. Not trying to blame anybody or stir anything up. Just want to make sure everybody knows that did have an impact on our revenue stream. There is, as we talked about now this year, several years ago, about 10 I think, Congress decided to do away with what was called earmarking, where they received direct funds. So if there was a water bill, they might put in, for example, Guthrie, $31 million for water lines. And you wouldn't have to apply to any federal agency. That money would come direct to you for that project. Remember the bridge in Alaska to nowhere? That was an earmark. And Congress has now reinstituted that program. They're calling it community project funding. It's very competitive. Whether we get any of that earmarked money or not it's not a high percentage, but you don't get it if you don't go after it. Normally larger towns, we've experienced that before with ACOG funds and stuff. Normally those kind of funds go direct to larger communities, military installations, and then the money we have to go after is the pool of money that they do. Like they may give EDA money, or they may give USDA money. And then we have to apply to them in a pool of money that's budgeted rather than money directly given to us. But we do want to go after the earmarks, and those are in play right now. So that's potentially one source of money. And then, of course, with President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan, they recently in the Senate passed the Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act. But in this plan that's in process, it's not been budgeted, there's $56 billion for modernizing water systems. So it may go to USDA, it may go to OWRB, but they will get pots of money that we can apply for, and we'll want to apply for those grants. So that's another potential funding source. But if we don't get outside funding, I just quickly had our finance people look at if you did 10 million, 20 million, or $31 million bond issue, on a 30-year bond issue, 10 million, you're with debt service, your annual debt would be $518,000 for 30 years to pay that off. If it's at if you presume about 3% interest rate, if you just took 3,407 water customers, everybody's bill would go up $12 if you looked at a flat fee. Now, of course, we would do it in the rate structure, but at this point, it was kind of silly to do a new rate structure for this because we don't know exact numbers. If you did the whole 31 million at 3%, it would be almost $40 per month per customer. And then, of course, if you did 2%. So that's a major undertaking. But at some point as a city, we're going to have to decide if we can't get earmark money or money through the infrastructure program the president is trying to fund through Congress. At some point, we're going to have to look at funding it ourselves. And so those are something that we need to talk about at our retreat. What's our strategy going to be? That's all I have on the replacing our water mains in our valves. I'd be glad to answer questions. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about the funding we went after under the earmark program. Any questions before I move on? Okay. Again, this is money that's dedicated federal funds for specific projects by working directly with Congress. Very competitive. We don't know if we got a chance in H of getting it, but we might as well pursue it because somebody's going to get it. Each House member can propose up to 10 projects in each appropriation bill, and there's about 10 appropriation bills. Senate, similar. On April 13th, we met with the field reps for our congressional delegation to discuss possible projects. And we had 5 projects that we presented for consideration for earmarking money. Of course, the first one was the water infrastructure that we just talked about, replacing the 56 miles of water mains that predate 1975. We presented 2 road projects, Sooner Road and Southwest 19th Street. 2 options, one full depth reconstruction, the other one is more limited and just a resurface and rehabilitate. Third project we presented was relocate the youth baseball complex out of the floodplain. The fourth was construction of new aquatic center, and 5th was construction of a second fire EMS station. On road improvements, again, we proposed Sooner Road and 19th. Sooner Road from the city limits, 300 feet south of Seward to US 77 or Division, and 19th Street from the west city limits to Noble. As you can see, we all know the condition of Center Road and why it needs to be replaced, so I won't read all these, but it is a project that needs to be done. If you do a full depth reconstruction, you're looking at about $3.8 million. Well, if we set aside $300,000 or $400,000 a year out of CIP to do road projects, you're going to have to save up for a number of years to do a $3.8 million project. You're not going to do any other overlay projects. Resurface, rehabilitate saves you a little bit, but we would propose doing full reconstruction and do it right.
When was that built? Do you know?
When was it built? It was
originally a Model T road.
it was originally US 77, and it was deeded to the city. Whenever the state and federal Department of Transportation build new highways and interstate, they've got so many mile lanes. And so what they do is they build like a new interstate, then they give the city the mile lanes that are inside their city limits. So we inherited that road when they did I-35. So that's been a number of years ago. And so.
That's just when we inherited it. I bet it was built in the 20s.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And what we found in other towns when we inherited state highways, sometimes there was not adequate drainage under them when they built, so they're maintenance nightmares. And so it does create problems when you have poor drainage. So reconstruction would be the best bet. 19th Street, again, you can read it at your leisure, but we tried, and this was State Highway 33 at one time. Then 33 was rerouted, so again, we inherited this one. Full reconstruction of this is about $2.5 million. So we've asked for both of those for consideration. The third thing that we talked to our representatives from our congressional delegation is funds to replace or to move the youth baseball complex from the floodplain in Cottonwood Flats to a different location outside the floodplain. And you can see this is the 2018 flood. There is some money Department of Commerce got from FEMA from 2018 to do some floodplain projects. We're still waiting for them to do a notice of funded availability on those funds. And we will pursue those funds if it's eligible to help pay for this project. But if you look at the history, the one in 2019 crested at 27 feet. That was our 8th highest crest. The highest one was back in 1983 where it reached 30 feet. But if you look at the history, it's not once every 10 years. I mean, look at 2017, it happened twice. 2007, look how many times it crested in 2007 above flood stage. So it's a reoccurring event. It's not like every 10 years you have to rebuild everything. So we have developed a master plan for baseball and softball fields out by the hospital, Academy Road. This is existing softball fields, and this is the area that we got the $1 million Land and Water Conservation Fund for to build these 3 new fields, to get those started. I'll go in more detail when we get to the point we're talking at the meeting that we talk about sports complexes. What we would like to do is each of these existing fields, upgrade those and come up with a plan for each one of them and go to corporate sponsors, and name that field after the corporate sponsor, Paycom Field, for example, or others, to upgrade these three existing fields. This is the baseball complex. And so again, this is the area that was the $1 million with our $1 million match. This is the new part we will be building. The baseball fields, when we get funding, it's construct 6 new fields, new concession stand, parking lots, inter-road. I would point out, we are doing the softball fields first because that was the collective wisdom of our sports authority that we put together, advisory committee. But those softball fields, while they're built for softball, they will be constructed a way you can play baseball on them in the interim while we're trying to figure out how to fund the baseball fields. So they're not left out entirely. But that's about a $5 million project. And so we asked funding for that. The fourth one was replace our aquatic center in Highland Park. It was built in the 1940s. I've not seen a definite date. I don't think it was WPA project. There's no WPA emblems on it. It appears that it was done in the 40s. Worked with the engineering firm out of Kansas City that specializes in aquatic center. This is a sample of aquatic center they did in another community. Maintenance issues we have, of course, we have to do about 40,000 gallons to make up water every day. Not only does it cost you water, it costs you the chemicals to treat the water, and as you can see, the spalling that we have going on with the concrete, it's so soft that you can just push your finger through it. And we have to repatch that every year to reopen. And our aquatic center or swimming pool, I call it a cement pond, in Highland Park, is getting close to its age limit. Its useful life. The new aquatic center that we proposed under this plan is about a $5 million project. It would have a capacity for 500 people. It would have a zero depth entry, which is the type of facility that kids and users like to have today. They don't necessarily want just a deep pool. They enjoy it from a recreational standpoint as much as they do swimming laps. It'd have 2 water slides, lap lanes, 2 diving boards, a children area, and a concession area. The last one we proposed was a second fire EMS station. Since the city has adopted or annexed back in 1972 the south end of the community, that area has developed a lot since 1972. Mission Hills, health clinic. Now we're seeing BOTAC. Mission Hills, we're looking at a subdivision plat coming in before long that would do roughly, is it about 300?
307.
New houses. We've got 3 more subdivisions that we're working with that are looking at coming in with subdivision plats for 3 more subdivisions inside the city limits. So the demand for fire and EMS is getting a heavier load. And we serve the city limits in 1 rural fire district. On EMS, we serve about 2/3 of the county. Our county between 2000 and 2010 grew about 24%. We're one of the fastest growing counties in the state. between 2010 and 2019, 14%. So the demand on our EMS service is growing as well. The National Fire Protection Association, first engine arrival on scene should not exceed 4 minutes for 90% of the responses. With our current station that we have, we cannot meet that standard within our city limits, let alone our rural fire district. ISO rating, standard 5 road mile maximum travel distance from the fire station. Anything beyond 5 miles is considered a class 10, which is basically no fire protection. We currently have numerous residential and commercial areas outside of that 5-mile rule. So it costs them more for their fire insurance. What we're looking at is 3.5 for a fire station, fire EMS station, plus another 400,000 if we put a fire training facility along with it. And that's it. Those are the projects. Now, whether we have any chance of getting those and it's just pie in the sky and we're dreaming, we don't know yet. We won't know. If we don't go after it, we won't get the funding.
You don't get what you don't ask for.
Correct.
I do have a question though, on the
Yes.
fire station, if
Yes.
you do put in another fire station, where are you thinking about doing that? Have you given that any thought yet, or is it just?
We have, but I don't know that we want to disclose the
Okay,
various
okay.
locations because when the city identifies a site, it seems to affect the price.
Okay, all righty. Anybody questions?
Is this a good way to, as a prelude to the retreat, to get some of this information before you so that when we go to the retreat, we don't have to spend all morning doing this? You already have these.
Because then we have a chance to look at it a little bit.
Correct. And then maybe we can have a little more productive retreat that way. That's all I have for workshop.
Good job, Leroy.
Thank you. I guess that's it. Guthrie Public Works Authority meeting,
You can't do nothing for
Can't do
20
nothing.
minutes.
can't start for another 20 minutes.
That's right. For how long?
20 minutes.
Can't start till 7.